Hello painters, today we're back to the old world to continue my dwarfs with some Irondrakes. Let's get to it. As always, I start my dwarfs from a purple. This time I'm trying Diabolic Plum as the base. I've been trying out different purples to find one that works well and that I'm happy with. And after using this for my Thousand Suns, I figured I'd give it a shot for my dwarfs. And after doing these guys, I think I might settle on the Diabolic Plum going forward. The reason I've been starting from purple is because I wanted to try using a universal shadow colour for the entire army, and purple is what I settled on, so here we are. These guys are basically entirely metal, which is going to make getting some contrast and colour onto the models a bit tricky, but I do make it work. The first colour is plate mail, and I block in almost the entire model. For the chainmail parts, I just do an overbrush, leaving the purple showing in the shadows. I'm sure you've already noticed, but these guys are sub-assembled. I've kept the arms and shoulder pads separate for now, and I'll be gluing them together once the main colours are all blocked in and I'm ready to do shadows. I definitely want to get some different colours on these guys, other than just the silver and gold. And the gun is an easy place to get that. So I use rough iron for most of the guns. The filigree and piping will be done different colours later. I really think this is necessary. It's very easy for these guys to start feeling like they're all one note if we don't get some different colours onto them. They especially need something dark. An important thing to note when doing the rough iron is to make sure you get the handles in the other hands. They're a part of the gun and should be done the same colour. It's probably worth saying that I'm doing these guys as a batch of 5. So if you want to work out the per model time for any of these steps, just divide it by 5. I'll be putting the per model time up at the end for the entire model. I used to add it on the screen for every step, but I think it makes the screen too cluttered. But if you think I should include it, let me know in the comments and I can always go back to adding it for all my batch painting videos. The only non-metallic colour for the entire model is the straps holding the wrist guards in place. Normally for my dwarfs I use leather brown as the leather colour, but I wanted to use something a bit darker here to help break up the model a bit more, same as the previous step. So I used oak brown instead. Honestly, once the model is together you barely see the straps, so it's not a big deal and you can use your army's normal leather colour if you'd prefer. This is something I found when I was messing around while painting my Rune Lord, and I used it on my hammers as well. So I figured it'd be good to add it to these guys too, and it's another way to break up the silver. A 50-50 mix of Flesh Tearer's red and contrast medium over the silver gives it a nice reddish brown metallic colour, which I like. So I use this on the beard armour and the armour plates that have the runes on them. So that's the wrist guards and the crotch protector? Yeah, we'll just call it that. If you don't have a lot of metallic colours, or you're missing some of the ones I'm using here, this can be a good substitute too. You can pick a contrast or speed paint, thin it down and paint it over the plate mail to give a coloured metallic. It's a good way to create easy coloured metallics, though they can be hard to highlight, so I normally prefer to shade them down instead of highlight them up. If I had given any thought to this step before I started painting these guys, I may have picked a different unit to paint. After doing so much work on my Thousand Suns lately, I am very over painting gold trim. Thankfully these guys don't have anywhere near as much and it was only around 15 minutes per model to get it done. Though that didn't stop me deciding to call it a night and leave it for another day when I reached this step. All the filigree on the armour, the shoulder pads, the wrist guards and the guns got hit with hammered copper. I really like the way the guns are coming out. The gold on the dark, rough iron stands out really well, and I think it's going to give a great point of interest once the models are all together. And the final step before gluing them together is Cobalt Metal. This is a nice metal with a bluish tint to it that I'm using for the pipes and the braces on the gun. You could use plate mail for these parts, but I wanted a colour that was a bit different just to give another splash of colour on the models. And while I paint yet another metallic, why don't you give the video a like if you're enjoying it? And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to see more content from me. According to YouTube, only 6% of the people that watch my videos are subscribed. Surely we can increase that number. Subscribing is free and it helps me out a lot. I'm a tiny channel, so every like and subscriber matters. Then I glued them all together. I didn't record this because I figured it would be quick and easy and not matter, which it was for 4 out of the 5. One of them was an absolute nightmare. I try fit everything before gluing to make sure that everything fits nicely together. And they did all fit together easily while I was dry fitting them. Then one of them, as soon as I put glue on the model, just would not go together, and it became a total mess. I could not get the arms to go together properly. I managed to get glue on the model, which of course screwed up the paint. So I had to retouch the paint, and it was just a whole ordeal. One which I'm sure many of you watching this has probably had happen to you before too. I decided not to add the gluing time and the time to touch up the paint job to this video, because I feel like my incompetence shouldn't really be relevant to anyone looking to get a rough time for how long these guys should take, and adding an extra hour or two because I never learned how to glue things in kindergarten wouldn't give a realistic time. For the shading, I'm being picky on where I place it. I don't want to do an all over wash as it'll discolour the silver. So I'm picking out parts facing downwards, or parts that need some extra definition. I'm also doing a pretty heavy wash on the beard guard part. I don't really have a colour that'll work well for highlighting it, so I just gave it a pretty heavy shadow instead. Though you could use a bright silver to highlight it, I feel like that there's already so much silver on the model that I'd rather not, because it'd all blend together a bit. The first highlight step is greedy gold for the golds. It's pretty easy to tell the parts that should be highlighted on these guys. Anything facing upwards is easy to pick out, and most of it doesn't really need much brush control. You only really need brush control for the filigree on the back and the helmet. The rest of it you can do with the side of your brush, and it's easy to hit. Then with Mithril, I do the last highlight. I use this on both the plate mail parts and the cobalt metal parts. And that's all the highlighting I do. So much of the model is taken up with the gold and silver that, since we've already established shadows, you only need to highlight those two colours really. Plus the fact that it's done with pretty much all true metal paints, which take care of a lot of the highlighting for you with the way they reflect the light. These guys just don't take much to highlight, which is a shame since highlighting is my favourite step. And that's it, 10 steps. which if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know is incredibly low for me. I normally do far too many steps and make things unnecessarily complex for myself. These guys have been the quickest of my dwarfs, coming in at under an hour per model. They just don't need much work to make them look great, which is a good thing when you're trying to get an army painted. The problem I found is there isn't a lot you can do to take them to the next level, unless you went full non-metallic metal, which I am not prepared to do for a full army. Maybe one day I'll give it a shot. I'm happy with how these guys came out, and I think they're going to look great next to the rest of my dwarfs. I like the way they stand out on the marble bases too. If you want to see how I did the marble bases, click on the link above. Or if you want to see more of my dwarf army painted, check out the playlist on my channel. And as always, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, catch you in the next video.